we'll be tormented by it for a long time. I will be. And I want to say I'm sorry for misleading people. It was not intentional. That's all.
Tucker Carlson is once again sending a pretty strong signal that he is starting to distance himself from Donald Trump. And this time, it happens during a conversation with his own brother, Buckley Carlson, who, by the way, actually had a role in the past writing a handful of speeches for Trump, which makes this whole moment even more interesting. And as the discussion unfolds, both of them make it sound like they have completely stepped away from the MAGA circle and are no longer aligned with that movement the way they once were. And naturally, this has sparked reactions from all sides, with Cenk Uygur jumping in to defend Tucker Carlson, and even getting into a heated back and forth with Mehdi Hasan on Twitter as the debate around this situation keeps gaining traction. But before we dive fully into Tucker's own words and hear his explanation directly, take a second to really think about this. Do you believe Tucker is simply making a calculated political move because he can see the shift in public opinion and knows it is becoming harder to stay in that lane? Or is this actually a reflection of what he genuinely believes right now? Because depending on how you see it, this could mean two very different things. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and listen closely to exactly what he had to say.
I and everyone else who supported him, he wrote speeches for him, I campaigned for him. I mean, we're implicated in this for sure.
Yes.
It's not enough to say, well, I changed my mind, or like, oh, this is bad, I'm out. It's like in very small ways, but in real ways, you and me and millions of people like us are the reason this is happening right now.
Yes.
So I do think it's like a moment to wrestle with our own consciences. We'll be tormented by it for a long time. I will be. And I want to say I'm sorry for misleading people. It was not intentional. That's all I'll say. But anyway, but the question does present itself immediately. Like, what is this? Was this always the plan? You don't want to be a conspiracy nut, but like clearly there were signs of low character. We knew that.
Yes.
But it didn't, there are tons of people of low character who like outperform their character. It doesn't have to be.
Sort of the norm, actually, these days, I would say.
I've outperformed my character a lot. I don't have especially high character, right? But, you try to, whatever, you try your best. But what was this? Was this always the plan?
Looking back after the last year and a half, it seems like it kind of was. And it's easy. Well, you could get really deep about it and say, what was Butler? Like, how was it that and Ryan Ruth, I mean, he was subject to 2 legitimate assassination attempts. Have we ever gotten to the bottom? I know you've talked a lot about this, but have we ever gotten to the bottom of that?
I haven't talked a lot about it. I don't know the answer, but I know that those investigations have been stymied. Fact.
Yeah, stymied from the very top, from people who actually would have the power to get to the bottom of it.
And the motive.
Yes,
yeah,
very much. So the enormous amount of money he got from Miriam Adelson now seems suspect to a lot of people at the time. But, there's a lot of money in politics. To run for president requires an enormous, I mean, Kathleen Camel-Toe went through $2 billion in 4 months. So, sure, there's an argument to be made that you get money from those who will give it to you. It's just the nature of that game. But it's still reprehensible, and it's still a big question mark. Why would someone who has obvious and demonstrated allegiance to a foreign power give Donald Trump $250 million while he's running for president? I mean, how is that defensible? It's really not. If Russia had given a PAC for Trump, if the mayor of Moscow had somehow, assembled an enormous amount of money and put it in a 501c3 for Trump's benefit, would that have been acceptable? Of course it wouldn't have been. So what does it's so basic, it comes back to the money. Like, what did they get in return for that amount of investment? And it's clear.
I get it. No, I mean, of course, I agree with every word that you're saying. I just think, given his behavior and his demonstrated disloyalty and viciousness to previous supporters.
Yes.
Why wouldn't he display the same lack of loyalty to Miriam Adelson? I mean, that's kind of the question. The only people he's been loyal to are the neocons.
So this is really where the whole debate starts to heat up, because the core question being raised is about loyalty, and not just casual loyalty, but the kind that actually reveals what someone truly stands for when everything is on the line. And the argument being thrown out here is pretty blunt, suggesting that the only groups Trump has consistently stayed loyal to are neoconservatives and the financial backers who support him, which immediately shifts the tone into something much sharper and more critical. And then it takes an even more intense turn, with the suggestion that expecting Trump to ever turn against money itself might be completely unrealistic. Almost like questioning whether Tucker genuinely believed that would ever happen in the first place. Because the way it is framed here paints a picture of someone who prioritizes financial gain above almost everything else, pushing it to an extreme by saying he would be willing to sacrifice nearly anyone if the price was high enough, even going as far as implying that most people in his circle would not be exempt from that. And while that may sound exaggerated, the point being driven home is about just how powerful money can be in shaping decisions at that level, especially when the stakes climb into the hundreds of millions, which makes this whole conversation feel less like casual commentary and more like a serious accusation.
Miriam gave my campaign, indirectly and directly, $250 million. She was number one. When somebody can give you $250 million, I think that we should give her the opportunity to say hello. And Miriam, make it quick, because $250 million is not what it used to be. Okay?
I met Alan Dershowitz, and he said the legal thing about 4 more years. And I said, Alan, I agree with you. So we can do it. Give me a second. Yeah.
She said, think about it. I'll give you another $250 million.
I will give.
But her husband, Sheldon, was an amazing guy, and he'd come up to the office, and there was nobody more aggressive than Sheldon. I think I spent more time with him and you, because you usually came up together, but he'd call and say, can I come over, please? I say, Sheldon, I'm president of the United States. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's like maybe tomorrow. How about tomorrow? No, please, just for a little while. And he'd always say 10 minutes. It turned out to be about an hour and a half, right? And what he did is he fought for Israel. That's all he really fought for. He just wanted to take care of Israel.
The argument keeps narrowing in on what really motivated him, with the claim being that at the end of the day, his focus was never as broad as people might have thought, but instead centered heavily on specific priorities like supporting Israel. And that framing alone shifts how you interpret everything he did while in power. But then the conversation pivots because Cenk Uygur steps in with a much more pragmatic take, basically saying that in politics, you cannot afford to be overly rigid or emotional about where progress comes from, and instead you should be willing to accept victories wherever they appear, even if they come from people you usually disagree with. And he pushes the idea that when you find even a small area of agreement with your political opponents, you take that as a win, you acknowledge it, and then you keep moving forward rather than getting stuck in endless conflict, which adds a completely different perspective to the discussion and forces you to think about whether politics should be driven more by outcomes or by strict loyalty.
I don't know what people want past that. I mean, that's as good an apology as I've ever seen, and he didn't need to give one. So people make mistakes. People vote for people they don't like. I've been forced to vote for a whole bunch of people I didn't like, right? And so, but nevertheless, he does this heartfelt apology. So on behalf of anyone who cares about war and genocide, I accept, okay?
And it definitely did not end there, because things escalated even further when Cenk Uygur took to Twitter and openly pushed back against the wave of people criticizing Tucker Carlson's shift away from Trump, basically questioning why so many were refusing to accept it, arguing that if Tucker is now distancing himself from Trump and aligning with an anti-war and anti-genocide position, then what more are people realistically expecting from him? And he made it clear that those rejecting this move do not speak for everyone who genuinely wants to see these conflicts come to an end. But as expected, the replies quickly filled up with strong reactions, including Benjamin Dixon, who previously worked with TYT, calling Cenk out and accusing him of constantly searching for ways to find common ground with right-wing figures in the United States, while still sarcastically acknowledging the moment by saying he is glad Tucker appears to be taking an anti-Zionist stance now, even if it comes after years of what he described as pro-war, racially charged, and establishment-aligned behavior. And that tone of skepticism carried through many of the responses, with some people outright dismissing Tucker entirely by labeling him as a white nationalist and refusing to take his current stance seriously, while others argued they simply do not trust him at all, pointing out that Trump's nature was already clear back in 2016, and anyone who failed to recognize it back then has lost credibility in their eyes. And then there were those who took a more strategic view, suggesting that this could all be a calculated move by Tucker to position himself for a political landscape that exists after Trump is no longer the central figure. But the conversation kept expanding as Mehdi Hassan also jumped in, raising concerns that while Tucker may now be speaking against certain issues, he is also pushing other controversial positions, like opposing vaccines and criticizing Trump for being too supportive of them, which some people find difficult to overlook. And in response, Cenk doubled down, essentially.
All these people that are so against the war in Iran and so against Israel and so hypercritical of Trump, all of them are going to tell you to vote Republican and vote for J.D. Vance in 2028. And it doesn't matter how much these people criticize the war, they will endorse him in 28. They will try to get you to vote for this person. Simultaneously, they are telling you, and they're getting you all ramped up, telling you Trump is evil, Trump is the Antichrist, Netanyahu's evil, Israel brought us to war, this is diabolical, this is pure evil. And then they're going to tell you in 26 you got to vote Republican, and they'll tell you in 28 you got to vote for J.D. Vance. And these are the same people that told you to vote for Trump in 2024, even though we knew then that he would bring us to war in Iran, just like we know now that J.D. Vance will suck if he becomes the president.
And when you look at it from that angle, the idea does not feel all that unrealistic, especially when you consider how recently Tucker Carlson was openly praising J.D. Vance and speaking highly of him, which makes this whole situation even more complicated. Because at the same time, J.D. Vance himself has acknowledged in the past that he does not actually fit the version of him that Tucker seems to promote. Almost like there is a gap between the image being presented and the reality behind it. And that contrast raises even more questions about whether these endorsements are based on genuine alignment or if they are part of a broader narrative being shaped for a specific moment, making it harder to tell what is truly authentic and what might be strategic position.
Everybody knows it's in our interest to wrap this up in a way that protects core American interests, of course, that avoids unnecessary humiliation, that brings some stability to the region, as they say, but wrap it up. And the administration understands this. The Trump administration clearly understands this because news reports just in the last 24 hours have told us that the president is thinking about or planning to, depending on who you believe, dispatch the vice president to hammer out some kind of deal with the Iranians. And if that happens, and we don't know, just repeating what we read, then that's a pretty clear sign that the administration wants to declare victory and move on, certainly to move on. And they probably couldn't pick a more credible person to do it. Ideology aside, Vice President is smart, he's honest. He's not one of the people who's gotten richer in government service. He's probably one of the people who got poorer in government service, which is a pretty good measure of someone's moral rectitude. And he understands power dynamics.
If you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran?
Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
So, with all of that laid out, I really want to hear your take on this. Drop your thoughts down in the comments and be honest about it. Do you think this shift we are seeing is actually genuine? Or does it feel more like a calculated move playing out in real time? And looking ahead, do you believe this could push figures like Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and others toward more moderate positions? Or does it come across as just another layer of political maneuvering that will eventually circle back to the same place? Either way, the conversation around this is clearly not slowing down anytime soon, and I am genuinely curious to see where you stand on it. That is all for now. This has been Your Guy World, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.